right, welcome to Getting the Herd After Hours. We got two great guests tonight, and we're gonna have them go ahead and take it away, guys.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you very much. Uh, there you go. John Shinholser here in Mechanicsville, Virginia, doing another live stream. I got a great guest tonight, an old friend of mine, Joe Schrank. He's just an incredible, enthusiastic, intelligent guy. Knows a ton of stuff about harm reduction, Portugal model, the proper use of marijuana for treatment and rehab, and just a great opinionated guy, man. He's like, I think he's a little bit left of center, but he's one of those guys you got to love, man. And I think a lot of them, and I'm excited to have you on the show. So, Joe, why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself so the folks will know who we're talking to?
Thanks, John. Left of center. I'm not sure how to take that exactly, but I'll think. I'm okay with it. So yes, it's a compliment. Okay, great. Well, I'm a social worker, and thank you very much for having me on your broadcast. I think very highly of you, mostly because of your work with prisons, which is one of the populations that I think is really underserved. And so I've done pretty much everything in the space. I've worked in hospitals and detoxes. I've done interventions. I've worked in fancy rehabs in Malibu. I've started programs. I started thefix.com, which, by the way, I'm no longer affiliated with. Even all these years later, people still somehow hold me personally responsible for every word that's written on that thing. They fired me a long time ago, which is always great. You love to get shit canned from your own creations. And what else am I up to these days? I added a new website, which, by the way, you should take a look at. It's called The Small Bow, and we've been really good about being committed to not having treatment center advertising. So I don't want to sully anything like that. I don't want to have, because really the Fix became like a blog for treatment centers, and that was never the intention. So check that out. That's thesmallbow.com, edited by me and a friend of mine, a really great guy, AJ Delario, who came from Gawker, sort of rose up out of the ashes of Gawker, and he's doing really well in his recovery. And I am a person in long-term recovery, 23 years, so it's been quite a while. And my personal brand of recovery, I'm totally abstinent from all forms of intoxication. I'm a big AA guy, but I also have this. It's a hard thing to negotiate because being like a 12-step is not the same thing as clinical social work practice. Those are very different things. And I'm often at odds with people who are in my position where they're in recovery, but they're also clinical social workers. I think that if they're not offering all options, if you're only offering the option that you like or the option that you responded to, that's malpractice.
Now, you just hit on something. What you're talking about is multiple pathways to recovery. And
correct.
When we got clean and sober, whatever you want to call it, there was just a handful of ways. Nowadays, you got all these guys pimping out all this shit, and I think some of those multiple pathways are overshadowing some very common sense, practical pathways. And I think that's the space you're in. I know you're pretty educated with marijuana type treatment or whatnot. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that's a really hard thing for people to get their minds around. I am not a cannabis user, but one of the reasons that I came back to California was to incorporate cannabis into the practice that I'm doing. So I started 2 treatment programs that allowed for cannabis use under medical supervision for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is that it's really great for detox. That's just sort of the simple truth of the matter. It's great for symptomatic care. Some people can't sleep or the nausea or, all the things they complain about. Cannabis eases all of those symptoms. There's not interactions with other medications. Not everybody is a viable candidate for that. It is a question for you and your physician. I'm not looking to push that. I'm looking to give people the freedom to explore that as an option because you know what it's like. I mean, I've sat through detoxes all over the world with all different kinds of people of various demographics, or socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's always a really, really, really hard thing to get them through it. and they're always asking for more medication, for the symptomatic care. So being able to utilize cannabis in that regard, I think can be tremendously helpful. And I think that it should be considered. Yeah, look, in real terms, I can't sleep. Okay, you can have a gummy. You can't have any more Valium, right?
Now,
You're tapped out on Valium.
Now, do y'all use other medications too? Are they available?
Totally, of course. And look, I think of cannabis, I think of it in a bunch of different ways. I think of it as a medicine, for sure. There are people with the medical application for it. I think that it does intersect with recovery because people in recovery are on all kinds of medications, and people leave treatment with all kinds of medications. They leave with Xanax, they leave with Valium, they leave with all kinds of things. So why not consider the possibility of using cannabis, which is safer, it's effective, right? So, and just as an example, my mother has gotten off any pain medication for her arthritis using the stuff, using it as either topical or the vape pen if it's an acute flare-up, that kind of a situation. So I don't think it should be ever taken off the table. I'm not sure that in fact, I'm quite sure it's not right for everybody. There is no medication that's right for all people, but the idea of cannabis isn't even a discussion because of what we've been told for the last 40 years, which is effectively lies and racism. That's really why those policies were developed. Why not? I get it. People have a very hard time with it.
Yeah, you're getting some evidence too. You got some real data now you're collecting, correct?
Correct. And there's a really great researcher, Dr. Amanda Ryman. She's a professor at Berkeley, and she's done a lot of the research. We know certain things about cannabis and about people who have a medicinal cannabis card in the state of California. One of the things that we know for those card holders is that they report significant reduction or elimination of their use of alcohol. So I'm already in favor of that. Anytime people stop drinking, I think it's a better thing. People who are cannabis users don't have the consequences that people who are alcohol consumers do. You know what happens when people drink. Violence rises, domestic assault, violence between partners, accidents, all kinds of things happen. The states refuse to tax the stuff properly. So why not have people have that option where they're safer and they're more contained? So that's already one thing. California went to the Adult Use Act 3 years ago about. So in other words, anyone who's 21 or older, they can make up their own minds about the use of cannabis based on whatever it is their issue is. Maybe it's recreation, maybe it's relaxation, maybe it's sleep. The number one reason that people are coming into a dispensary in California, they're all saying, what do you have to help me sleep? In my view, if you're an older person, whatever your situation is, you're so much better off with that than you are with Ambien or some of the other sleep medications. And you're certainly not better off with insomnia. That never helps anything. I mean, I've never seen people who have sleep disturbances gain a lot of traction with whatever their mental health issue or whatever their addiction issue is. So it's a hard thing for sure. It's a hard thing to get. This is actually wrong. Somebody just said crime is up in Colorado.
Well, yeah, I saw that comment. See, that you're talking two different things. You're talking about medical use in a treatment setting, and then Matt's talking about the Yahoo boys getting high in Colorado. Two different things.
Of course, it's two different things, and there's always going to be a black market, to be sure. Right. And the idea that cannabis consumption is crime is already flawed. Like, that's already wrong. Maybe it's a bad decision.
And think back when prohibition was lifted back in 34, I think it was, there was a spike in, public nuisance crimes associated with everybody getting drunk legally, I guess. So that's pretty normal, I think, in states like Colorado, but that should level out after a while.
Well, it does, and I think that it has, and I'm not sure that crime in general may or may not be associated with whatever form of drug use is possible, right? So the Latin term is post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? So the rooster crows at dawn, but does it cause the sun to rise? We don't really know. We're always trying to figure out those correlations and causal relationships. personally, I believe that drug use is better served for people when it's regulated and when it's legal. It's a hard enough thing to gain traction on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, without adding another layer of criminalizing the behavior.
All right, let me ask you a question. Frank wants to know, is there an assessment tool y'all use to see who's better fit for cannabis treatment? Using that as a treatment drug, how do y'all figure out who can take it and who can't?
Well, look, I mean, I think that there are people, it's a history, right? So there are people who have had really negative reactions to cannabis. They're not viable candidates. There are people, and I'm not saying that it's 100% safe for all people. I'm saying it's a better option and shouldn't be taken off the table. So when there are people who have a history of negative consequences associated with it, they're not a good candidate. If it's young, they're not a good candidate. There's a bunch of different things. But one of my missions with this, John, and I know that you agree, is let doctors be doctors. I'm a social worker. I went to social work school. I didn't go to medical school. I don't give anybody any kind of medications. One of the big problems I find in treatment settings is that medical doctors are not allowed to practice medicine. And everybody, with recovering people, we're all geniuses. We're all insurance experts. We're all doctors. We all know everything about medications and who should take this and who should take that and who should take the other thing. It really is a conversation with your doctor. And so I don't like to give medical advice. I mean, I hear that one all the time. Oh, you let them smoke weed or take, whatever it is. I'm like, no, I don't let them do that. I follow the protocol of medication that's prescribed by the physician who's licensed and certified. It's not really, I don't know. Look, it's not just my opinion.
A bunch of hippies giving out pot on the front door to rehab.
Wait, so that no, I mean, no, absolutely not. It's not like, oh, hi, welcome. Oh, well, and that's one of the things that people think is that it's just like, oh, here, come over to my treatment center, come over to our treatment programs, and you can smoke weed. First of all, I'm not looking to take anybody out of abstinence at all. If that's working for people, if they're finding their recovery through total abstinence or 12-step participation, I'm all for it 100%. And I take a lot of shit about not supporting AA. My response is, I've done it for 25 years. How much more supportive could I be? I don't really know. What I'm looking to do is to expand the tent, right? The data is very clear. The literature is clear on this. It is only a fraction of people who are getting the services that they need. There's another 20 million people who never talk to anybody, and they're not welcomed in the tent. So we don't really know what is going to be the best point of entry for all people, what they can tolerate. And we also always have to keep in mind that human dignity mandates that the individual has the right to self-determine. They get to make their decision about their recovery. I don't get to make the decisions about it, or it can't be based on what I want for them. I have a duty to warn if I think they're making a bad decision, but ultimately it is their decision. So there are lots of people out there who do not want abstinence-only 12-step recovery, but they want to do something about their drug use or their substance misuse. So cannabis is actually a really good option. And I say this all the time, right? I've come up with this. It's not research, it's anecdotal. This is the Nelson principle. Willie Nelson was a violent drunk by his own admission. He's now 86 years old. He still tours, he still plays, he still writes music, and he's doing great. He would have been dead decades ago if he had not done that. Do I get to say, well, he's not doing it right, or he's not he's not sober, or he's not in recovery? I don't. He gets to make that decision. And it's worked out for him. And so I think that there are a lot of people out there who could have a similar experience.
Yeah. Hey, quick question. Do you think there's a correlation between, I'm guessing, cannabis use and schizophrenia, or is it good for schizophrenia? I know you can do any drug and like drink yourself into psychosis, smoke weed into psychosis, but what's the evidence with schizophrenia? Do you know?
There is some anecdotal evidence, and there's some I hear that one a lot, right? My nephew is schizophrenic from smoking weed. No, he's not. Schizophrenia is a very complex malady. It has underpinnings of the environment. It has underpinnings of of organic conditions, timing, pacing, the environment. There's a million different things. It is not a light switch. There isn't, oh, he was a normal boy and then he smoked weed and now he's schizophrenic.
Right. Yeah, it's got more to do with the brain and stuff, I imagine.
Totally. It's got more to do with the brain. It's got a lot to do with the family. And one of the things that I think is, and I mean, I know you remember this. Remember when heavy metal caused suicide?
Oh, yeah.
That was bullshit. What caused it was family dysfunction. And
Heavy metal make me want to commit suicide. That's why I stick with country and classic rock.
They were looking, well, I agree with you on that. But they're looking for something to blame. They're looking for a bunch of things. With that said, most people are perfectly safe using cannabis, right? Most people are perfectly safe eating peanut butter. There are a few people who will go to the hospital and potentially die if they eat peanut butter. So we don't totally know. Some of it is a trial and error process, but there are people who have very strong and negative reactions to cannabis. And what that means is that they are not viable candidates to use the stuff for whatever application. That doesn't mean we should criminalize it. It doesn't mean we should put people in jail. It doesn't mean we should shoot them. It doesn't mean we should forbid other people from reaping the benefits or potential benefits of the stuff. Right. It just means that those people it doesn't work for them.
Yeah, I want to switch gears a little bit over to the Portugal model and how they do things in Portugal. But before I do, I want to ask a question, but I'll precipitate it with a statement. Every parent I know in America who buried a child from an opiate overdose, they wish their kid was just smoking weed. That much I know for a fact. Have y'all had good success with opiate addiction using medical marijuana, either detoxing or keeping people off of opiates? Then I want to go to the Portugal model.
Yes, I mean, I think that it can be a part of a comprehensive plan to maintain away from opiate use. I say it a lot. If it's a gateway drug, gates go two ways, so it can also be used as an exit drug. My personal belief with heroin use or opiate use is that it's incredibly jarring to a human on both ends of the experience, right? So when it's introduced, it's incredibly jarring, and when it's taken away, it's incredibly jarring. It's a very hard thing to say to somebody who has been opiate dependent. Now you have nothing. Here's your styrofoam cup. There's the church basement. Fuck you. Like, that does not work for people. So using cannabis, look, if you go down, if you dive 40 feet, you can only come up a certain amount of, you can only come up 10 feet an hour or whatever it is, or you're going to be very, very, very sick. So I find that cannabis can ease people into recovery. It can maintain them so that they aren't using opiates. It can help them in a variety of ways. One of the things I hear all the time is, well, we'll lead them back to their drug of choice. But that's no.
Right.
I mean, look, 95% of people who go to rehab and attempt abstinence go back to their drug of choice. Yeah. So maybe it's abstinence that's leading them back to their drug of choice. I don't really know. And the other thing that you and I sort of share is I'm not a vet, but I lived with a crazy vet for 20 years. So I kind of understand the culture. And I think that the vets are a population that responds incredibly well to cannabis. Like, if you can do that, that is such tremendous progress for the traumatized vet. And I'm staying with Lori right now. I'm 2 blocks from a massive VA on Wilshire Boulevard here in LA. And, I see those guys out there, and they're banging around, they're drinking, they're using pills. Why can't they be given cannabis for symptomatic care, for sleep, for PTSD, for all of those kinds of things? And in my view, it's not even compassionate to say to them, well, you can have nothing because you're not really in recovery if you're using weed. It helps them sleep. If you can get pills and booze and a gun from a vet, that's unbelievable progress.
Right. Hey, now I want to ask you. Now we could debate cannabis for hours, okay? And
totally.
Yes,
right.
If you legalize it, which hopefully we do, that yes, kids, they say they'll have easier access to it, and the brains aren't developed till they're 23 years old, and a lot of substances, sugar, fried food, tobacco, alcohol. I mean, the kids are already exposed to everything. So there's going to be a lot of growing pains and navigational challenges in the future with this. But I do want to spend some time on what they're doing in Portugal with that decriminalizing the user amounts, continuing to prosecute dealer amounts. But the point is, overdose deaths have pretty much gone away. The correction population has been reduced by 40%, and there's a huge recovery community in Portugal. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been interested in Portugal for, I don't know, 15 years, a long time. And one of the things I interviewed Barry McCaffrey for The Fix. This is going back at least 10 years ago. And he's a former drug czar. He's a general.
Right.
And he was really pissy with me, which I don't care. I mean, I
Oh,
didn't
with the
take
rank.
it personal. Well, right. I mean, I was like, I said, well, hey, tell me, well, could the Portugal philosophy and model, could that work for America? He said, Portugal is bullshit. Like, he was yelling at me. I was like, no, it's not. They do such a better job. It's not bullshit. There's more people in treatment. There's fewer overdoses. Not only that, there's fewer transmissions of secondary things, Hep C, HIV, all those things that people get when they're injectable drug users. So they're doing a better job. And the reason they're doing a better job is because they're framing this as a public health issue, not as a crime. And so that's always been one of my big things is, look, we're not really going to make any traction with the drug problem in America until we change the mindset that it is a health issue. It is not crime. As long as we're going to criminalize it or make certain people criminals because of something that they do, we're never going to go anywhere. Portugal eliminated that. Like, let's just take that off the table. If you're using in Portugal, let's say you're injecting in the park, what happens is you get a citation, right? And the citation is for you to meet with a social worker, and they will outline your options. This is what you can do. This is how people take care of this problem. Some
No
people take
felony.
medication. No felony, no jail time, nothing like that. None of those sort of red herrings that don't actually help people, right? People they also have the option to walk away and say, look, I'm not interested. I'm a drug user, get with it. But you have to show up to the appointment in the meeting. So, and what has happened over the last decade, at least, it's probably longer now, is there's more people in recovery. An overdose in Portugal is pretty rare. I mean, they happen for sure, but not like America, not anywhere near. Crime has reduced. Lots and lots and lots of positive things have happened with regard to their drug policy. What hasn't happened is they haven't had to say that these are bad people, right? That hasn't happened, or that these people are criminal, or that they're
stigma's been reduced too. The stigma's slowing down over there with addiction.
Totally. Absolutely. The stigma is slowing down because people are treated, look, we say it all the time. Well, it's a disease, right? The disease of addiction. Addiction's a disease. Okay, all right. So why aren't these people treated like patients? Nobody is arrested for having a disease. There's lots of diseases out there. Hypertension, poor diet, and inactivity is a choice. Hypertension is a disease, right? So I guess it's a choice to use or not use. Addiction is a disease, and it is not served by people by incarceration. And so I don't know how, look, I think that America has to shift gears entirely into how we think about this problem.
I think in America, just as an example, I would bet, I already know our local jails are 80-90% addiction related because they did surveys on it, but I would bet at least 40 to 50% of America's prison population is direct association with users amounts, paraphernalia, needles, spoons. And in Portugal, from what I understand, they have walk-up methadone buses and vans. They give you needle exchanges. They give you safe injection apparatuses. They even have social workers follow you to wherever you're sleeping and offer you services. Yes, they have a pretty good size, health agency, but a lot less criminal justice. Can you imagine that in downtown USA where there's a methadone van you can walk up to, get a handful of needles, get your methadone, get a ticket to rehab if you want it?
Well, I mean, look, I would love that. I mean, I'm a social worker, right? These are the kinds of things that we're striving for. I think there should be on-demand treatment. I think there should be mobile units, and I think it should be financed by taxing the alcohol industry. You know, look, in this city, in this state, in California, the last raise on alcohol was 1993. Really? Like what? I mean, how do they do that? Who are these evil fuckers who
Special
keep
interest.
this? Well, right, but who? I mean, how do they do an amazing job? Like alcohol is a low tax, recession resistant, low barrier to entry. I was at CVS, and there was like those little airplane bottles of vodka on sale in a bin, right? Like so teenagers can steal it, or you could be pissy with your girlfriend and buy 10 of them and go home and drink yourself to death. I mean, all kinds of things happen. So I don't know how. That's how I would finance these changes, John. And I agree with you that there should be mobile methadone units. You should not. You should just take all the stuff that doesn't work. Judgment doesn't work. Shame doesn't work. Look, we want you. We don't want you to also have HIV or Hep C. So here's a sterile needle. Here's information about not being an IV drug user. Here's cannabis. How about that? Can you make that switch? Can we eliminate the risk of death from whatever it is that you're doing? Can we take death off the table? Let's just start with that. I mean, I feel like.
Yeah, how do you think we're gonna get some policy shifts? Because I honestly believe that, like, you know, big pharma pretty much runs policies in America. Big corrections run it, and all, you know. And if you look back, how did we get ourselves in a drug war in the first place? You know the history with that, how that came about.
Look, I think that the drug war and people, you know, they think I'm a paranoid left coast liberal. Except when I'm living in New York City, then I'm a paranoid right coast liberal. But I think that America is a racist country. I think that part of the way that it's a social control. If you read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, I think that was really compelling, and she makes a great argument. Look, if I didn't like English people, what do? You criminalize part of their culture. So tea is illegal. It's going to lead to death. No more tea. You're a bad person if you eat tea or if you drink tea. Tea is, you know, tea, forget it. We have to get this. These tea drinkers, they're bad for everybody. You know, all those kinds of messages. First of all, all cultures have the let's sit down and have some, right? I mean, if the Turks, you know, the Greeks, you know, the Uzo, you know, my Italian side of the family, when there was family business, you sat down, you had whatever it was, anisette or whatever it was. So that's not unusual, right? That's not unusual in any way. I think that the criminalization of drug use it has a long history for sure. It spiked with Nixon. Like Nixon hated hippies and he hated Mexicans. So he criminalized, they went on this massive propaganda campaign of misinformation about cannabis. The truth of the matter is that our drug policy in terms of the war between alcohol and cannabis is exactly 180 degrees of what it should be. Alcohol should be behind a counter. It shouldn't have a label. It should have a warning label. It should have a big picture of a cirrhotic liver. Like, you know, it should have a label that says increases stupidity in young guys. You know, lots of different things, right? I mean, it should be honest about it. And the warning label on cannabis should say, not good for everybody. You might play more video games. You might get a good night's sleep. I don't know. There's some really pretty
McDonald's drive-through. Don't forget that.
Right. There's some steep consequences here. You may go to 7-Eleven. Those kinds of messages.
Yeah,
so I think that the history.
I think there's
sorry, go ahead.
I think our bureaucrats and our politicians have basically monopolized black market, meaning they're on the opposite side of it by keeping this massive black market in operation. That's how they make whole careers out of this stuff. And all the science, all the evidence, even when Nixon did that Schedule 1 of marijuana, every scientist that was somebody, it was 100% unanimous. That's a bad idea. You do not want to criminalize marijuana. And even President Carter had Senate commission and hearings about the drugs, and even they said you don't want to criminalize addiction. You want to keep it in the health. So one president after another doubled down on this alleged invented war on drugs, and it's driven by special interest in these policymakers, and they continue to make bank and hay off this. But what irritates me the most is the voters know this, and they keep voting these people into power to keep with these policies. And you want to talk about some hypocrisy, like the current COVID-19 crisis. All of a sudden, we have this massive epidemic worldwide, and politicians are breaking all the rules, stopping all bad policies overnight. They're throwing every bit of money they can at it. And no matter how you slice and dice it, more people are dying from addiction than COVID. And the scientists and the science say the best way to treat it is the opposite of what they're doing. And how the hell do we overcome that?
Look, I don't know anybody who's ever read. Are you getting an echo?
I'm good right now.
You're good right now. Okay. Look, nobody's ever run on that platform. Like, who runs on a recovery platform? I'm going to be your city council member. I'm going to work on your behalf to get rid of criminalizing drug use. We've got enough dead bodies. There's too many families in grief. We have fucked this up for decades. So, it's time to change that, right? When Barack Obama said, look, you do the same thing with Cuba for 40 years, you have the same result. It's time to do something different. And I was really waiting for him to say, so we're going to do something different with the drug war.
Well,
he didn't do it.
Yeah, any president can do an executive order, take marijuana off Schedule 1, treat it like alcohol. Overnight, 20% of all of our correction budgets go out the window. Yeah, they'll get some of that money back on pot smoking and driving and, pot-related crimes, but a major reduction in those tax dollars. And that extra money can be spent on education, transportation, healthcare, recovery. It's the biggest no-brainer there is. And that user amount that they're doing in Portugal, I think that's a masterpiece. I think no addict should ever have to go to jail for using. Yes, I believe in the ability to force them into a lockdown rehab for 30, 60, 90 days, but no felonies, no extra jail time or extra felonies if the PO, they get a dirty urine or whatever. I mean, and then talk about trauma for a minute. Somebody knows trauma is at the root of most substance use disorders. And the worst thing you can do for trauma is put them in a correctional environment or put them in a situation where they can't think straight. I mean, it's just, I go back to the science, the data. We know better, and the voters know better, but yet we keep doing the same shit over and over and over. It just drives me nuts.
We keep doing the same thing. That is correct. One of the things I think that we need, when people talk about education, one of the things that I like to educate families about is that drug use is not a lesson to be learned. These people are not dumb. I mean, I've had people come out of prison and their families think, okay, they're really going to get it now. No, it doesn't really work like that. So we have to approach this from a different way. This is not that kind of a situation or thing. The other thing that I don't really understand is, why do we hate drug users so much? We love drugs, right? Americans consume more drugs than any other culture in the world. But why? What is it about drug users that we find so reprehensible, or what is it that we hate about them? And why is alcohol so acceptable? You are correct. There's now, I don't know, how many people are dead from coronavirus? 30,000?
I think probably up to 40. It's rising. It's going to be a lot,
It's rising. No, and I don't mean to minimize the loss of life or people who have experienced that or lost somebody, but we have dropped 88,000 bodies to alcohol for decades. Nobody says anything about that at all. And I actually think that's underreported, because, I mean, have you ever read an obituary that says died of acute alcoholism? No.
Yeah.
People don't, but people do. And so I think that the number is actually higher than 88,000 for year after year after year, 88,000 Americans to alcohol. That doesn't count overdose deaths, doesn't count other drug use. And by the way, 0 to cannabis. Let's just throw that out there.
Right.
But the point being is, I don't know what it is. I don't know how. I mean, partially it's in our DNA as Americans. We know that, right? We know that.
Hell, they all drank alcohol back in the 1800s, man. I mean, we got addiction.
Oh my God, they had to. In Boston, they had to have it because the water wasn't safe. So they all drank this. They were all sort of drunk because they all drank this low-level ale crap because the water wasn't safe to drink. After the Revolution, Washington had this idea, hey, let's tax whiskey. This will be great. It'll reduce the use of it, and we'll be able to pay down the war debt. And they came at them with pitchforks. It was called the Whiskey Rebellion. They almost destroyed the whole country. We were based on addiction. The Jamestown colony would have failed if they didn't figure out how to grow tobacco and sell it to the English. So it is part of who we are, and it is not going anywhere. What could change is how we deal with it. And we could deal with it in a much more compassionate way. We could deal with it based on science. We could deal with it based on public health advocacy. We don't have to make people criminals or bad people because they're drug users. Drug users are some of the smartest people I know. I mean, look, I don't know. I'm always thinking of, I was doing my walk today because, I can't go to the gym and whatever. So I'm walking around and listening to stuff. And I was listening to John Berryman, drank himself to death. But what a brilliant dude. And it's like, why should we be ashamed of who we are?
Right.
We shouldn't.
Hey, what would you do? Let's say you were president. What would you do to turn our, increase recovery, increase public safety, decrease the impact addiction has on society? What's like the top 5 things you would do?
The first thing I would do is deschedule marijuana. The fact that it is on par with cocaine and heroin. Like,
that's ridiculous.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Well, it is ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. That's like Sesame Street. That's like one of these things is not like the other. One of these things, it doesn't belong. Cannabis does not belong in the same silo as heroin or cocaine. So we immediately reduce crime because we're not making people criminals for using something. So immediate across the board, federal legalization. The distribution can go to the states. The funding can go to the states. The other thing I would do immediately is there's a parity act, right? So the taxation of intoxicating substances is the same because people are like, tax cannabis. Yes, tax it. But why is alcohol getting away with not being taxed? So you want to raise taxes on cannabis, you go right ahead, but that means you automatically raise the taxes on alcohol. And a percentage of those taxes raised goes to recovery services and treatment, detox. They could have detox on demand in any city over 30,000 people with that funding. All you have to do is show up and say, okay, please detox, please help me. Great. We got some money. We're good. We have a clean place. We have a safe place. We have nurse practitioners. We have physicians here. We can help you. And so I think that would probably be the first thing that I would do. I'd also start a massive campaign similar to tobacco, right? So, people who, and I'm kind of on the tail end of remembering when everybody smoked. But there was a time, right? My mother says, oh, sure, we smoked when we were pregnant. I was like really?
That's why I'm so addicted to nicotine, man. I can't get off.
Well, right, yeah. Well, right. But you've seen a shift in your lifetime, John. I mean, there was a time when every one at the dinner table in my family was smoking. That's not true anymore. People and I think that part of it was the public permission campaign of what could happen to people. I think people would think twice if you had a picture of a cirrhotic liver on a bottle of distilled spirits. I think people would think twice in a bunch of different ways.
The people I run would look at that like, that's the good shit. That's the stuff I want, man.
Well, yes, but we're talking about the masses. Right. We're not talking about So I think that we could do that. We should also have a national dialogue. I don't know why whoever is the president, forget Trump, forget this guy, but whoever is the next president, why is they not saying, this is enough? We're going to have a conversation. Every single family in America has lost somebody to alcoholism or addiction or something. Every single one of us. And if you haven't, you know somebody who has. And, why are we not having this as an open, candid conversation rather than just being one giant dysfunctional family of not talking about it and doing the same repetitive shit over and over and over again? We've lost a generation. You've seen it. I'm covered in tattoos of these dead kids, of kids that have overdosed, like these memorial pieces. My best friend overdosed. You've seen it. You've seen it as much as I have. And we can do better. I don't know that we can ever eliminate it entirely, but I do think that we can do a much better job than we do now.
Yeah, and I think
we should be looking at force.
Yeah, but I don't want to underscore the value of localizing our efforts, mobilize recovery, because locally in the state by state, locality by locality, we get these communities flushed out because there are some pockets of some success around the nation in certain communities where they localized, their thinking and wasn't so hard on what everybody else is doing. So I think there's a lot to be said for getting these if you get these state politicians to do some stuff in their states, but they got to divert some of those funds they're blowing in corrections and get them down to the recovering communities. But I tell you, another big problem is these bureaucracies. They think they know best. They think they know everything. They get a pocket full of money. Look what they did to the state opioid response funds. That Washington sent down all those billions of dollars to the states. A good portion that got pissed away by these selfish, self-centered, arrogant bureaucrats. And all these recovering folks all around America, they were mobilized. They got recovery centers. They got recovery houses. You got all these great old timers in recovery ready to help. And what do we get? Go away, little boy. We know best. And here we are. The masses are still addicted. The best resources aren't utilized. You got all these families running around who lost people that they got some great ideas. They can't get a dollar to do what they need to do. Big Brother is out of control, man. They have lost their way. And, if I had my magic wand, I'd get rid of all these old bureaucrats and politicians, bring in a whole new crop, get these people, get the successful people in recovery shaping policies. You know what I mean?
Without question. I mean, it's always been one of my big questions about all of this. And I've done a bunch of things. And one of the things that we tried to do was start a recovery-focused high school in New York City. And it was marginally successful, took a long time. But I would go there to meet with Christine Quinn, who was speaker of she ran for mayor and she lost. But anyway, so you would go there and there's like all these kids in jackets and ties and, I'm the commissioner's liaison for parks, for the statues in the park. Like, oh, okay, great. I'm this, I'm that. I do. There wasn't anybody saying I'm the liaison for the recovery community. Like nobody was asking the recovery community what to do about the drug problem. And I would say, well, we live drug free, right? Or some of us do, or whatever our brand of recovery is. How come we don't have a seat at the table? And why aren't you asking us?
Not only that, just as recently as the ERA movement. Remember back in the 70s, the ERA was becoming alive and they were really getting things done. But you know what? There was a group of conservative women said, whoa, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to be liberated. Why are they speaking for everybody, So I think that's the problem, man. These groups are only speaking to their own people. And they're just not letting everybody at the table. That's ridiculous. So.
And I agree with you. It should be localized. I would be in this scenario where I am the president. I would be all for people having localized, whatever works for their particular community within some guidelines, right? So it has to address a pluralist society. Medication would have to be dispensed by a doctor, not a sober living operator, and not your sponsor. Not your sponsor, the plumber, your physician. Your physician says this is the doctor, this is the medication. You got to be on medication. Listen to the doctor. So
Yeah.
within certain guidelines, I do think it's probably better at a local level because every community is different, every household is different, and so the needs are all going to be different as well.
Hey,
But
let me switch gears just for a minute. You know,
yeah,
you live in a recovery household. You're in a recovery relationship with your significant others, and so am I. So we got a lot more in common than one might think. My wife has slipped in the room, and I think she wants to say hello and give some input.
Hi.
hi Carol, how are
Hi, how
you?
are you? It's great to see you. I hope you're safe and well.
We're
Good.
good. You know, we're a little bored. Every time I get pissy, I try to think of Anne Frank and think
There you
like,
go.
well, you know, look, they were in there for 2 years and they didn't have Netflix, so
Yeah,
I should just
exactly.
zip it. You know, I should
Exactly.
stop complaining.
Yeah. How about all the
But
guys?
no, we're
How
good.
about all the people new on isolation and all these guys that did time in jail and prison? They happy as shit to be on the couch with the remote and they can walk to the refrigerator, man. So we you know,
Totally.
I think the recovering community could probably show the rest of the world how to do this thing, you know?
Yeah,
Well,
I've been
well, that is true.
well, give Lori a hug for me, and I do think that you had mentioned something about cannabis earlier, and I do think that there's a little bit of good news, anyways, in that it is going to be scheduled so that research can be done. And while that seems like, so obvious that it's ridiculous, at least they've come to their senses about that.
Yeah, that's a pretty big hit. Now that the federal government can research cannabis, we might see some rapid, developments in this
Well,
area.
it sure took long enough, and
Well, we could. I mean,
I
yes, and I'm
understand
all
your
for
impatience.
research.
Don't misunderstand me like I'm giving them big
Yeah.
kudos for doing what was necessary decades ago, but at least there's some movement.
There is some movement, and believe me, the research hawks are hovering. And if they can do that, you could unleash people at Stanford, at Berkeley, at UCLA, all over, and they will get to the bottom of it, and they will be able to tell you what it does or doesn't do,
That's
which I
correct.
think is terrific. The best research is coming out of Israel, so there is research,
Yes.
right? We do know, but I'm all for. And when people say that, well, there's not the research, I'm like, look, your issue is not with me, your issue is with the U.S. government. I'm all for knowing what it is. And
Yeah.
I'm all for being able to screen people if they're a viable candidate to reap a benefit or not. I'm not for, look, I'm kind of like a man without a country. It's hard to be a sober guy, talking about cannabis. But then I always remind myself, well, look, I'm a social worker as well. That's a very different thing than a 12-step call. But I'm not like, and I will say, in California, they're loony about this stuff. It's like, well, what can't it do? It can't possibly do it. Can it hover above traffic on the 405? Can it make you do that? Because, it's literally like everything, it's good for this, it's good for that, it's good for, like, well, it can't be, it's not magic.
No.
Let's be
Hey, Joe.
realistic about
Joe,
the stuff.
Joe, you should be in some of my board meetings when I'm trying to tell my board, nice recovery organization, primarily abstinent based. And I say, look, we should really look into cannabis as a medical, marijuana for detox, and instead of these other drugs, like, I don't know what the shit they putting all them kids on nowadays, but hell, man, I think some of them be better off on medical marijuana. But, I'm ahead of my time as usual.
You are ahead of your time. It's one of the reasons that we get along so well is because we're both ahead of our time. The thing of it is like, and I tell this story. My mother is a military wife. Like, she's not playing around with, we would say, look, there are people who say that it's good for arthritis. It took a really long time for her to come around that, because we would say, oh,
Yeah.
cannabis, and she would think, her mind would go to Angela Davis has gone crazy. Reagan is going to shut down UCLA. Let's not do it. Let's not go crazy. So now, years into this, she has found great success of getting off of potentially harmful things. It's a topical. It's not like she's bringing a bong to bridge or anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that the cultural implications of this stuff need to be cleared away, right? So quit thinking of it as this criminal thing, or for people who are marginalized in society. If you can derive benefit from it and you're safer and you get the desired result, why not?
Yeah.
right?
Hey, have you ever heard of kratom? You know a little bit about kratom? Kratom?
Totally. Yeah. 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 For sure. And I think that that's a similar thing. But again, we need more research on that
We
stuff,
do.
right? We
We
need to
do.
know what it is. And part of the reason that I think that there's been success in legalized states is that dosing matters. And so
Yeah.
people can get the same thing. Like if they find that this helps them with sleep, they can go back and they can get the same product in the same
Exactly.
Right.
right.
Yeah, they got a study on kratom right now. They're doing a big study down in Florida somewhere. I forget exactly where, but the first couple trials have been really promising. I mean, they're working on the kratom study, so that's coming.
Yeah, and I'm all for those things. I think that they can be really helpful. There's a woman I know not well, but she from Stanford who moved to the Netherlands. She moved to Amsterdam so she can do some of the psychedelic treatments for people. And one of the reasons that I'm for it there is because it's regulated and it's legalized. So she can say, here's the whatever, this is the
Right
dosage that we're going to, right, rather than, oh, I got this from Dave down an alley. He says it's great. So those are the kinds of practices that I, just reject flatly when people say that, oh, well, I'm going to try this or that. And it's like, well, but if we had a better regulation, better policy, we could do a better job with whatever benefits might be, with some of those things. Whether it's kratom or whether it's the psilocybin or some of the other ayahuasca, whatever, some of those things that people are trying.
Yeah, I got excited when I heard they were giving old folks like a 3-month tablet of LSD or something, low dose. It helps them. Yeah, it gives me hope when I get older, man. So.
Yeah, maybe you'll get some. I mean, that's another population that does really well with cannabis, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of what they're and Laura's sitting right here. I mean, I used to tell her all the time, tell your grandparents to smoke weed. I bet they could get rid of half of those pills, because most of the pills were based for symptomatic care. Can't sleep, no appetite. This hurts, that hurts, my knee is stiff.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things. And so what is the value of, pumping people who are in their 80s, pushing 90, full of pharmaceuticals? You're trying to make them comfortable. You're trying to make them have a better quality of life. They weren't going to do it.
Hey, I gotta ask, since Lori's next to you, much like my wife, she likes to give input. Would Lori like to weigh in on anything, give any input?
Maybe, Lori, would you like to give any input? John's asking. She's asking on what in particular?
Oh, how about relationships and isolation? How's that working out
or
for you?
How is she dealing with her hair is what I want to know. I'm having to put mine up in a scarf.
Oh, she
there she is.
See, your hair looks good.
Here, I'm going to get some of your hair. I want to know how you're doing with your hair. With nothing
Are you assuming that I color my hair?
No, John was asking you a serious policy question, and I was asking you a frivolous hair question.
No, her hair didn't look good. She put a band on it to slide into my live stream here. So I know how the women are when they sit next to you. They like to give input. So how you doing?
And in your case, you are wise to listen to her input.
Yes,
of course.
Because your wife is a lot smarter than you are, John. I mean, come
on.
Totally
agree, man. Totally agree.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that.
And better looking. Don't forget that.
Oh, far better looking than you.
Definitely.
Well, God, I can't even believe I'm letting myself on camera like this. I'm wearing pajamas.
You're doing
good. I know.
A down vest.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was cold in my own house.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this is family night.
Family night, and I was sitting here in the room while Joe was talking, and I'm not just saying this because Joe and I are the closest of friends, and I happen to think he is the smartest guy I know. But I think that that people misunderstand when you hear the word cannabis, you automatically think, oh, well, in a lot of states, that's still a crime, and that's not okay. Yeah. And you're not sober if you eat cannabis gummy bears. But as Joe has pointed out, for me, that doesn't work. AA is my thing, and I'm in complete abstinence. So, that's not my jam, but I certainly think it is a better option if you're shooting heroin and now you eat a gummy bear before you go to bed. I don't know. That seems like a win to me. It seems very obvious.
Well, I won't pass judgment on that. So I'm all for it. Whatever it takes to reduce the harm of a dangerous drug, I'm all about it, man. I mean, who am I to say you can only do it one way? That's bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm an abstinent guy too, but still, I'm open-minded.
Yep.
Well, and I mean, I think that judgment doesn't help at all in anything in life. But in particular, with people recovering, we're not supposed to judge. We're supposed to keep our side of the street clean, worry about our lives, stay sober, and help another alcoholic. It doesn't say, and we want you to judge all your fellow alcoholics and drug addicts.
And what their pathway is. Right. No, it sure doesn't. You got
it, man. And you know what? I honestly believed on like the last 10 years, a lot of these narrow-minded 12-steppers have actually started to open their mind a little bit too, So I think there is a movement toward more true spirituality, more open-mindedness, more mindfulness, and more, I'm nowhere near the judging of character I used to be. So I think it's slowly getting better in that area.
I do. And I'm glad for that. I do. And I think our policymakers are slowly coming around too.
And
you may be right about that. And maybe we will see progress, not if the current person in White House gets reelected, but, and that's a whole other discussion.
Now, I'm not judging now. We just talked about judging.
Yeah.
No, you're right. But you're right. And thank you for calling me out on that. But I don't know. Nothing changes overnight, and Rome wasn't built in a day, and all those horrible cliches that are about to come out of my mouth. But look, I think that if people will just listen and learn the facts about cannabis, again, it's not for me, but I think to excoriate people for using cannabis to help them on their way to abstinence.
Right. I think we all just lift the prohibition on cannabis, decriminalize all other user drugs, and just move forward in our society and just cut the crap, man. I mean, so I'm just, I'm always frustrated with the way things are. So, but we're coming to the end of our hour. I'm glad you got to slide in there and give some input. You probably made the show go great. So.
Yeah, it wasn't really Joe you cared about. It was me. No.
That's right.
Well, we love you. We got to catch up soon, okay?
Yeah. Love you, Lori. Good to see you.
And please invite me on to speak next time.
You got it. We'll get you for the whole hour. I want closing arguments from Joe.
Okay, closing arguments.
Bye. Bye, Joe.
Nice to see you, Carol, as always.
Yeah, she just said bye. She went in the other room. She just wanted to talk to Lori. Hey,
that's fine. So people don't really want to talk. You want to use me to talk to Lori.
I know it. Hey, look. Okay, summarize. In a couple of minutes, and what are your summarized closing thoughts about tonight's discussion?
Well, I think that my underlying theme is that addiction and mental health are primarily health concerns. So we have to stop criminalizing that behavior. The whole idea of cannabis use in recovery, that's a whole other discussion. I think that there are so many people, we're all so individual, John. I mean, that. I always think of recipes right? It's different from region to region, house to house, grandma to grandma. Everybody's going to have their own little take on things.
Totally.
And so I think that we have to have much more respect for the diversity of how people improve and what it is that they want for their recovery. Maybe they reach total abstinence at some point. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But I'm all for people. I'm all for reducing the rates of death. Like, I always think, look, there's not really any more discussions to have when people are dead. Dead is dead. And I agree with you. Trying to get Americans to agree on anything, forget it, right? You could ask, do you like pizza? And people would argue about it. Or, how
I like it all.
right, are you in favor of vacations? You might get 90% of people agree that they like vacations. There's very few things that poll 100%. Would you take your kid back, your dead child, would you bring them back if they were benefiting from medicinal cannabis?
Right.
That's 100%. 100% of people agree with that. So look, I want people to find their recovery. I want them to maximize their potential. I want them to find their strengths and to mine and cultivate for the best version of themselves. I never think that is served. Those goals are not served by dragging people down with being criminals or getting lost in the judicial system or constant court dates or, all the things that they could be doing, right? They could be going back to school. They could be, and I love success stories. This young guy called me recently. He's like, I'm moving in with my girlfriend and I went to law school. And I was like, awesome. I thought you hated me. You told me to go fuck myself. Okay, great.
I get that a lot.
Right, no, of course. But the point being is we want many more of those stories and not as many so-and-so dropped dead, so-and-so dropped dead. Did you hear? This one overdosed, that one overdosed. Like, all of that has got to stop. And if we don't do something different, we can't realistically expect that it's going to.
Right.
So that's just kind of my message. And I think Portugal is the best drug policy in the world.
Yes, it is. No question.
They have done an unbelievably, they have turned around so many things in a relatively short amount of time. And, to me, it's like, well, why aren't we going and seeing, what are they doing? What can we adopt? What can we translate to American life? What can we put in place in cities? Look, I understand that the policy of what people will tolerate in San Francisco is very different from what they're going to tolerate in your town, right? So San Francisco, my hometown, they'll sure. Oh, yeah,
you must make a lot of money living in San Francisco. That's high rent neighborhood, man.
It is. But look, that's a relatively new. I mean, we also have massive social problems in San Francisco. It does. There's still that belief that if you're offbeat or whatever, you can go to San Francisco and live in safety, and that is true. And we don't want that to ever be changed. We want people to feel the undercurrent of St. Francis. Like, you are welcome here. It's whatever, you're gay, you're trans, you're this, you're that, whatever you are part of the bouquet of humanity and you can be here. So I understand that the policy that would work for a city like San Francisco is going to be very different than the policy that will work in other places. But if everybody understands, like, look, stop with the police. Why is the top policymaker a retired policeman, a general, or the former chief of police or something? It shouldn't be. You should be one of the top policymakers. Nor Volkow should be one of the top policymakers. It should be a board of.
You should be one of the top policymakers. So
yeah, I'd love to, but then all the pictures of me. I mean, everyone on Facebook was like, that guy told me to go fuck myself. It would all come out of the woodwork. Right.
Well, so, what I really know for sure is that America could do so much better, man. We are like, it's almost disgraceful the way we continue doing what we're doing, knowing the science and knowing the better ways to do things. And it's going to take a lot of warriors, a lot of soldiers to step up and just force these changes. And I'm really pleased and honored to have you on the show tonight, because I know you're one of those warriors. So we got one of the best warriors in this movement on the show tonight. So, we're at the end of our hour and 5 minutes, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time out from your busy isolation and shelter schedule.
Yeah, you pulled me away from like all kinds of obligations.
Right. So I really appreciate you. and we got to catch up soon, man. I love you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. And you're one of my recovery heroes, and I definitely would want to go to one of these prisons with you. I think that's like
I married the right woman.
Well, okay.
All
right, man. Thanks so much.
See you later. I love you,
Have
man.
a good night.
Talk to you later.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, Don.